Welcome to episode 406 of We Don't Die Radio. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And just a reminder, our home base is WeDon'tDie.com, where of course you can find medium classes, our free Sunday gathering, inspirational service with a medium demonstration included. And just this past couple of weeks, I started a new Patreon community. So this is not for everybody, but if you're a fan of my work and want to donate as little as $1 per future episode, I've got some good things in exchange. You get a full list of both my podcast episodes that you can search and click on, which cumulatively is over 550 hours of episodes. Of course, new episodes you get commercial free, which I can't guarantee on other podcast sites. And you get some interviews early bird, so you get them before the general public. So if you're interested on any of that, or if not, it's okay. But WeDon'tDie.com is the home base. And this is a very special video interview. So if you are listening on a podcast channel and you'd rather be seeing my wonderful guest and myself, just head over to YouTube and type in We Don't Die 406. And my guest today is long overdue to be on the show. I dropped the ball several years ago, I'm sure, but today is actually the perfect day. Robert Ginsberg is the co-founder of Forever Family Foundation, a global not-for-profit organization. Over the years, he has met and interviewed hundreds of scientists, researchers, medical doctors, academics, and mediums who believe that our consciousness survives our physical death. Bob hosts the Signs of Life radio show, is past editor of Signs of Life magazine, heads the foundation's medium evaluation certification program, and writes a blog at beyondthefivesenses.com. He is the author of the books, The Medium Explosion, A Guide to Navigating the World of Those Who Claim to Communicate with the Dead, and his latest book is called My Life Here and There, A Journey That Transcends Space and Time. Bob, with his wife Phran, who is now in spirit, and Forever Family Foundation are currently featured in the mega hit Netflix Docuseries called Surviving Death. I encourage all to visit, explore, and join foreverfamilyfoundation.org, where science and spirituality work hand in hand to bring comfort to the bereaved. Bob, a warm welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Well, thank you, Sandra, for that wonderful introduction. And you're right, it's been a long time. I think we've been communicating for probably 7 or 8 years. So we finally got this going.
Somehow it's all perfect. So, Bob, today I would love it if you would tell your story. But first, I just want to say you have been through a lot. You've experienced a lot of grief in so many different ways. So, our condolences for everything. And if there could be the Energizer Bunny showing what's possible to not only survive grief, but to continue on and make a difference for another, I think you're the poster child for that.
Well, thank you for saying that. But you know what it's like when you're in grief, you keep going because you have no choice. You just do what you think that you need to do. So.
Yes. Well, talk to us about you and your story. I know many people are familiar with you, but I think there's quite a few of our listeners and viewers that aren't. If you wouldn't mind taking us through back to the beginning and to where we are now.
Yeah, well, if we go back 20 years ago, pretty much exactly 20 years ago, I was a totally different person than I am now. I was a left brain logical thinker. I never gave much thought to the afterlife, and if we were having a conversation then, I would have dismissed the afterlife as a fantasy, a wishful thinking. And I said, because what could possibly survive? We are our brains. Our brains produce consciousness, and therefore, when our brains are no more, we're no more. And then tragedy struck, and even though I didn't so-called believe in the afterlife, my son and my daughter were in a car accident, and my wife woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning the day of the accident, and she was trembling and shaking and ashen white. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she just stared straight ahead, and she said, "Something horrible is going to happen today." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" And she said, "I can't tell you other than the fact that our lives are going to be changed forever today." And uh, I took it seriously because, my wife was, I mean, she wasn't a medium, but she was an intuitive person. And there were many things that happened in our lives together that I couldn't explain. She would have these visions and premonitions and so forth. And they were all good things. But logic told me if she was right then, she could be right now. So I did what most parents would do. And I watched over our three children during the day. And one was back at college, the other was going to college the next day, and my youngest one was working a part-time job. And as the day progressed, I let my guard down, and we went out to dinner. It faded from my awareness, and I dismissed it. And of course, on the way home from the restaurant, my son and my daughter were involved in the accident, and my daughter didn't survive, and my son had very serious injuries. So later on, my son was in a coma. He emerged, and it was clear that he was going to survive. I kind of hit me because you're in, as you might expect, you're in shock, for quite a while. And I said, wait a second, like, how did Phran know? How did my wife know? Because I saw her. She knew that this was going to happen, although she didn't have the details. So that started me on a quest. I mean, I'll call it a quest, but it was probably more of an obsession. I had to know, I had to find out how she knew. That was the first thing. And then I had to find out if it was possible that my daughter still survived in some form. And then I started, as crisscrossing mostly in the United States, meeting with medical doctors and scientists and researchers and authors and people in the field, trying to see if there's any evidence from credible people that had letters after their name, that studied consciousness, that suggested that we do, we're more than our physical bodies. And I found the evidence to be overwhelming, and compelling, to the point where I couldn't believe where nobody knew about this. I mean, how is it, kept secret? And one thing led to another, and we started the foundation in 2003, and we 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 gathered scientists, and mediums and academics, on our various boards, and we like to think of ourselves as a convergence of science and spirituality. Oddly enough, what I found doing the work is that sometimes I'd be interviewing physicists, and which was kind of out of my league. And I said, well, damn, they sound a lot like the spiritualists I'm talking about. They're essentially talking about the same thing, as coming from a single point of light, and a life, um, of compassion and love, on the other side, and how we're all connected. So there's not that much of a difference as people might think, between science and spirituality. So I've been learning every day since, as I said, since, for the past 20 years. And we're not, um, grief therapists, and we're very careful. But the information that we provide has been helpful to the people that are bereaved, because, um, I mean, let's face it, if you've lost somebody close to you, the only thing that gives you any hope or comfort is the thought that they still survive in some form. So if you could show them, um, reasons why, this is probable, it brings some comfort. Plus the fact that, we try to foster people to have their own personal experiences. And I don't have to tell you how that could flip one's perspective on life and death, because if you have this profound experience, I mean, it doesn't have to be a near-death experience. It could be a profound and evidential medium reading. It could be a dream visitation. It could be a multitude of different things. It really can make a big difference in one's grief. And it's been shown that, as published in peer-reviewed journals, that those studies show that those who believe in life after death do better in their grief than those who don't, and that makes a lot of sense to me because that's the only thing that gave me any hope. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry for taking up so much time.
No, this is about you. So more of you and less of me is fine. Did your daughter come through in the early days through mediums or anything when you got involved with this, when you started
Well,
searching?
yeah, I mean, my daughter was coming through like gangbusters and all sorts of after death communications. The problem was, since I didn't believe in an afterlife, I dismissed everything. My wife was having these unbelievable, profound experiences, and I was grateful for that because I was sort of living vicariously through her because I knew she would never lie to me. And if she was having these experiences, it meant my daughter still existed. But I still spent years and years. Admittedly is somewhat of a hypocrite because here I am, giving talks about evidence of an afterlife, and I still didn't fully buy in. It was as if I was trying to convince myself. But eventually, I moved from that stage of hope to belief and into knowing, and it took a long time to get to that knowing stage. So yes, my daughter was coming through, even though I wasn't recognizing like true after death communications over a period of about, I don't know, I mean, I journaled every one, but over a period of about 4 years, I had 74 dream visitations from my daughter. And they were true visitations in every sense of the word. They were tactile. I could talk to her, I could see her, I could hug her, I could kiss her, we could have a conversation. So that was my, lifeline. I felt very, very fortunate to have that. But yeah, I mean, I've discussed them and written about them. They were all, as a matter of fact, because my wife encouraged me to journal every experience that I had or that she had. There was some point where I had to gather up all my notes because somebody had asked me to contribute to a book, and then I started looking, and I even, just to show you how demented I am, I took all my notes of these experiences and I consulted with a statistician because I wanted to find out the odds against chance of all these things really occurring. And when I had 20 million to one shots, I had to relent and throw up my hands and say, you know what? Um, I have to follow the evidence. I have to be true to my word. This is the evidence. It's true. And so that, I think that a lot of people take the path, if science lots of times can open one up to recognizing all these things that are happening, because I needed that foundation, of belief. And once I had that, then I started to get my own, different types of after death communications and so forth. So yeah, I mean, we were both fortunate that she was a good communicator.
I think it's being human. We are hardwired not to believe because I've been at this since the mid 90s and I still wake up in the morning kind of pinching myself. Is this all real? Or am I, am I fake? Am I just sharing these things? And then another miracle, I call them, comes in and I know this is the real deal. But I just don't think being human, maybe we're tied into this game called life that we can't leave. I don't know, maybe you can live 24/7 just believing it all.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and you know what? I was somewhat surprised that over the years, and having conversations with countless numbers, of mediums, and some of them, extremely, good practitioners, and they would say to me, "You know what, Bob? There were times that I wake up and I question if this is real." And I'm like, really? It's like, I didn't want to hear that at the time, because, I want you to absolutely believe. But as you say, you're absolutely right. We're human, we have human emotions and plus, our upbringing and social influences and educational influences or religious influences, I mean, they're all part of who we are. And we're taught to question things that we can't perceive with our own physical senses. And that's instilled deep into our consciousness. So I understand that you're saying, but like what happens with you? Then all of a sudden there's a great reading, and so not this can't be making this up. So yeah.
Yeah, it's great readings. A good friend of mine, Scott Milligan, is a trance medium, and every Friday he does a demonstration, and we get to ask questions. And I've known Scott for almost 8 years now, and I know his spirit team for about the same. And they are completely different people. And when something resonates as the truth. You just feel
Yeah.
it. You know it. Anyways, tell us about Phran and your work together. You
Well,
guys have done some incredible things, and
yeah, I mean, Fran dragged me through this. Yes, I'm a co-founder with her of the foundation, but it was really all her, I mean, so she, I was just there along for the ride. I mean, I obviously, as the years went by, I took more and more responsibilities, but she created everything that we do. I mean, she, created the foundation. She created our, the medium certification program, and then the radio show, and we're publishing a magazine, which I after she passed I couldn't keep up with that, so we don't do that anymore. And then we'd hold annual conferences across the United States, and that took a lot of work. So she was wearing a lot of hats, and she literally worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. Never took, I mean, we could never go on vacation or anything, because even if I grabbed her for a couple of days, yeah, I couldn't get her off the computer and worrying about this and that. So that became her life, and I understood that. She felt that her whole life previous to this was building up to that point. Yeah, I just I never would have even thought to do this work, without her. And then I felt when she got sick. I mean, she got very sick very quickly, and I couldn't really. It takes over your whole body, and I couldn't really have many conversations with her, because she wanted to keep that positive mental attitude, that she wasn't going to die, and that what the things we were doing were going to help and so forth. But I got to have a few things near the conversations near the end, and I said, well, you know, what do you want me to do with the foundation? You need to tell me. I'll do whatever. So I really, I don't know. At one point, which is so totally not like her, because she was like a workaholic, and um, like a force of nature in everything that she got into. She looked at me and she says, "Why don't you just have a big party?" So, it's like actually a big effing party were her exact words. So I was like, that was not her, talking. But I was able to identify the core things that we do that she wanted me to continue, and that's what we're doing. And fortunately, she laid out the blueprint. I just continue to plug in the pieces and following her direction, and we keep growing. And so it's like a testament to her vision. But now we've got 14,000 members across the world, and everything that we do is well populated. And so that just shows you that there's such a great interest in the work that you and I and everybody else does. That and plus the fact that as people my age, baby boomers, start to get closer to their physical demise, a lot of people are questioning things that they never questioned before. They're questioning their own mortality, and could there be a possibility? So it's not only grieving people that are interested in the work, it's people that are curious.
yeah, that's how I got in. Fear.
Yeah.
Has Fran come through either through mediums or in dreams like your daughter has?
Well, a lot of people after Fran passed, they said, "Oh, knowing us, they said, oh, you're going to get signs like crazy," and I really didn't. For whatever reason, I think that Fran knew like what a hard-headed guy I was when it came to this stuff, so she, kept trying to think of things that were not easy to do, things that she knew that I could not question, on my own. I mean, I'll give you an example. Uh, so Fran, for whatever reason, she had her hands were very soft and silky, and I love to hold her hand. Sounds corny, but I love to hold her hand. So, and to the point where I was a pest, So I was always driving, and she was always in the passenger seat, and I'd always hold out my right hand, for her to, like she would like grab a hold of my thumb, and that all was right in the world. I felt comfort and all that stuff after that. So after Fran passed, every single time, um, for the first, I'd say, year and a half, I would say out loud to her, Fran, show me. So I need you to do this. Just grab my hand, my thumb, and I'd hold out my thumb like an idiot. People would pull up next to me and at a red light, and I'd be having my thumb out, and talking to some imaginary person, they thought. And nothing, like a year and a half, I asked them, nothing, never anything. And then one day I said out loud, look, I don't care. I really need this. You got to do this for me. You got to find a way. And with that, I felt, not only somebody grasped my thumb, but there was a vibrant energy in the base of my thumb. And, so my whole hand was vibrating, and the energy just moved up all the way, to the top of my thumb, and then back down again. And I was just, that's, lots of times these communications, they come with this sense of knowing. There was no question in my mind, nothing had ever happened like this before in my life, and here I am asking, her for a year and a half, and it finally happens. And it lasted, I'd say, it wasn't like fleeting. It lasted for a good 10, 15 minutes, and then it gradually went away. And of course, despite me, I still ask, and it's not happened since, because she would be saying, look, don't be an idiot. I gave you what you wanted, I can't, it takes a lot of work. I can't do it again. But that, to me, the way I reason that out is that's something she would do. It's something that I could not question, So I've had some dream visitations, not as profound as the ones that I had with my daughter. I get certain, signs that I recognize, but it's not something that comes very often.
She could be just so close, always with you. And I
Yeah.
can't imagine once we get there what, I've got my beliefs of what the afterlife is like, and that, we can eavesdrop and be with our loved ones and witness things in their life, and show signs and manipulate energy and all that stuff. Like, it's all possible, but how difficult is it? Is there truly no time over there, so they know it's a blink of an eye, we'll be together? Do they want us to live our life fully and not keep relying on them? Those are only answers we're going to get once we get there. So
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a question that you get all the time, because we certainly do. And people say, "Well, why don't I get signs?" And everybody else. Even when we hold these grief retreats, sometimes I have mixed feelings in these group settings when we have a discussion about after death communications and signs, because you have people that are sitting there that get very few, if any, signs, and then other people that seem to get them on a daily basis. And then, the ones that don't get them question, well, does this mean that my loved one doesn't love me, or, and of course not. But as you just hinted at, you're an entity of thought and energy. It can't be easy, I think that there are mediums on the other side that help our, discarnate loved ones to communicate. Yes, there are people that can communicate right away for whatever reason, but others, it takes, nothing comes through for quite a long time, and then it starts, to come through. So I wish I had the answer, as to why some people, don't get signs, but I tend to think that it's a learning process, plus the fact that I think there's a lot to do there. We're constantly learning and progressing and exposed to all different things, and we can, just by thought alone migrate among the universe. I mean, plus the fact that they know that this physical existence is just a tiny blip, and that they're going to see us again, and they're not in grief, and it's not as profound as what we think it is. So they know that we'll put in our time here, and we'll do our learning, and we'll move on. So, but certainly for those that don't get signed, doesn't have anything to do with the love or the bond that you had with somebody.
No, nothing at all. And I also think too, they do come to us in very subtle ways, planting, sometimes I get a wave of love. I told you earlier that today is my grandmother and my dad's birthday. She gave birth to him on her 18th birthday. So happy birthday, Dad and Grammy. But there's just these subtle things. I mean, sometimes I've seen like a slideshow in my mind just before I go to sleep of things I did with my dad. And my brain couldn't produce those images that fast. And sometimes I just get this feeling, or just a memory. And I think those are just little easier to do calling signs that our loved ones are with us. But we human beings just blow them off. That's just our imagination. But that's how mediums work. That's how it works. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in social media and our mind thinking about the past or worried about the future that we can't get in that present moment. We are when we dream, we are just before we fall asleep. And that might be the way they say
Yeah,
hello.
and as you said, sometimes the signs of these communications and signs are very subtle. I mean, it's not like somebody hitting you over the head with it. It's you have to be in that accepting mode and recognize it for what it is, and even though it may seem subtle, it takes a lot of work on their end to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to find out about some of the things you're up to. First of all, you and Fran started and you continue a long time radio show called Signs of Life. Do you have any idea how many episodes are out there? Because
I
there's
don't
a
know.
ton.
We've been doing it weekly since 2005, and all the episodes are archived on our website. And you with a search engine. So if you plug in somebody, and if we've interviewed them over the years, they'll pop up. I mean, originally, I was doing it was purely an interview show, and I was just interviewing people in our field. But that was so demanding because I would refuse to interview anybody unless I read their book if they're a published author, first. And so I had to read, four, sometimes five books per month, and with everything else that we're doing, I mean, I had books all over the house. I had books in the bathroom, I had books on my night table, every place I went, a book. And then I slowly developed the skill of speed reading. So it's the only way that I get through it. But after doing it for so many years, I said, no, I can't keep this up. So now we have we have five different formats of the show. We have one week, one of our certified mediums hosts a mediums and messages show, and it's simply listeners can call in and get like mini readings from one of our certified mediums. We have medium interviews. The mediums don't do readings, but you get into the mind of the medium by listening to the interview. We have a personal experiences show. I still do some interviews, but that took a big load off of my plate, and people get exposed to many different things. So but we continue to do that. I host with two co-hosts a show at the beginning of each month called The Gathering, and it's really just like a big afterlife discussion group where people call in with their questions or email in their questions or personal experiences, and we talk about those. So yeah, been doing it, but just something we can't stop. We've been doing it for so long, So
I know somebody sent me not too long ago the top podcasts on the afterlife. And there you are, number one. Signs of Life. I thought, oh, cool.
yeah.
So, yeah, you've been at it a long time and putting out good content. How about your blog, beyondthefivesenses.com?
I was always a frustrated writer. I was an English major in college. I wanted to be a journalist, and I my guidance counselor sent me to a university that she said had a great journalism department. I got there, I enrolled. I got settled and I found out they didn't have a journalism department. So, it's so much for guidance counselors, but I I went, and as life happens, I went in different directions and I never got to write. So I built a business over the years, and I used to do the next best thing. I used to use my advertising skills to help, build the business. That was my one way of writing, so to speak. And then after I retired from my real corporate job, I had more time, and I started, I was always writing stuff for the foundation, all of our, literature and so forth. And um, then I got the idea to write a book, and I wrote the book, and then I wrote the second book, and then there's a lot of stuff not connected to the foundation that I would like to get out there. So I just started, that blog at beyondthefivesenses.com, just for my own, so my head doesn't explode, just to get some thoughts out there, and keep writing. So it's always been a big part of my life, but it remained, hidden. So now I get to sort of fulfill what I really should have been doing all these years. Of
What
course,
line of
if I
business?
was a writer, I wouldn't have made any money, but
Oh my gosh. What line of business were you in? You said corporate.
I owned an insurance agency for 40 something years, so it's totally, that's a totally left brained. And you know what? In all those, in the 20 years, that I was still, involved, in the agency, none of my clients knew about the foundation, because I'm not the type that, I don't try to convince anybody. I respect everybody's feelings. If given the opportunity, with a client, I'll bring it up, and I'll just, throw out there some stuff that I've learned, and you could do with it what you want. But for the most part, I remember every once in a while, like when that Netflix documentary came out, all of a sudden I started getting phone calls from clients of mine that I've had for 30, 40 years. And I'm like, what? Was that you that I just saw? It's like, nobody had that. But I always kept that part, separate. Phran, on the other hand, we were complete opposites in every way. It's amazing. Like they say, opposites attract. I guess that's true. But, and she would use every opportunity that she had, no matter where we were. It could be a restaurant, it could be a doctor's office, to try to educate people into the stuff that we were doing. But I wasn't, I was more of a reserved, kind of person. And I never did that. But, the foundation sort of got me out of my shell, sort of because I was, especially after Fran passed, I was forced to do things that I never had to do, but they needed to be done. So then and then with writing the books and stuff, and then the documentary, I started doing more interviews and so forth. But I'm still not totally comfortable with it, but I do it, and you get better at it through the years. And
Oh, you definitely do. Yeah. And you can drop those little seeds, and if people pick them up and they want to know more, they can, or they might just say, oh, great. Yeah, this
exactly.
is definitely not something we can push on other people. So many people ask me, how can I convince my loved one this is real? It's like my best advice is let them come to you. We can't. I was a hardcore skeptic once, and I used to really laugh and make fun of people that believed in this. And there's nobody that could convince me. But I think it's our own journey as being a human that eventually we start asking these questions. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we're kindred skeptics, but you know that there is a difference between a closed-minded skeptic and an open-minded skeptic. I mean, open-minded skepticism is a good thing, because we should
yes.
question, because if you don't question, you're not going to fully be convinced, so you look for all the physical explanations, and when they don't exist, then um the only thing left is a spiritual explanation, such as um near-death experiences and deathbed visions. This is a prime example. I mean, um, or terminal lucidity. A sudden awakening, where somebody that's totally, mentally and physically incapacitated, um, you show up one day about a week or so before they pass, or just before they're passing, and they're totally lucid. And and you have it's as if they were never sick. I've experienced that in my own family, and you think it's a miracle, and then there is no medical or scientific explanation for that. It doesn't exist. I mean, it's not possible, and yet it happens, and I believe it's because we all have escorts to the other side. I mean, whether we can communicate that to others or not. It's just, the way that it is. So, a lot of these things is, you can't dissect them in a laboratory, it's just traditional science doesn't lend itself to these spontaneous types of, of events. But then the anecdotal evidence is beyond overwhelming. Millions and millions and millions of people can't keep experiencing the same thing, without people paying attention to it, even though it's so-called anecdotal.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about us human beings that we think we're the center of the universe and whatever we experience here on planet Earth is it. Because, when you think of the ever expanding universe, which is mind blowing, or if we get down to the quantum level, all we are is invisible vibrating energy. That's mind blowing. We don't understand how dreams work. Where is consciousness? All these questions, yet it's so easy to say, well, if science hasn't proved it yet, it's like, oh, got to think out of the box. Think out of the box, Bob,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what that certainly everybody in the work that we do thinks out of the box.
Exactly.
But
It does.
one day out of the box will become the norm. But
Yeah, exactly. It does help to hear these stories that are coming from credible people. And not that your everyday person that doesn't have a PhD, et cetera, and so forth, isn't just as valid. But when we start hearing medical doctors and what they witness in the operating room, and there's so many cases of these visions that people have weeks and days before they pass, stories from hospice doctors and nurses, and to hear some of those types of stories, I think it just helps lend a good word to, oh, this stuff is real. And how comforting is it that loved ones or whoever come to help us across the veil? I find that really exciting and comforting.
I totally agree, and they find this very inventive in the way that they come through. You reminded me of because when you asked about if I had any communications, from Phran, one of the mediums that have been certified by our foundation for many, many years as a hobby, not connected to her mediumship, did electronic voice phenomena. And she would do that consistently. And she was very close, with Phran. And then after Phran passed, she said, would you mind if I ask Phran in spirit, connected to EVP, a series of questions every week to see if we get anything? And I said, no, go ahead. And she would send me the audio recordings, after she did them. And, with EVP, some of them you have to listen really hard, but some are fairly clear. And in one of the EVPs, she said, what is the name of the organization that you founded? And you hear faintly but clearly, Forever Family Foundation. And then on another day, it happened to be my birthday, and she said, do you have a message for Bob? And you hear happy birthday. So those are the things that are, I mean, listen, a lot of EVPs can be dismissed as, as anomalies, but those that you can hear, they're really, really compelling evidence because it's something that we can perceive with our physical senses. Senses. We didn't read about it in a book. It didn't come through a third party, as a medium and so forth. We're actually hearing, what was said, and we have it on recording tape. So I don't dismiss the body of evidence from electronic voice phenomena and instrumental transcommunication. It's really, valuable.
Yeah, it's exciting to see
Yeah.
what's coming. I want to talk to you about your books because I know we share a passion of good mediumship. So you've got The Medium Explosion, a guide to navigating the world of those who claim to communicate with the dead. How did you start that and getting
Well,
certified?
when the first thing that I noticed when we got into this work was that there were an awful lot of mediums that called themselves mediums that really had very limited ability. I mean, I'm not saying that they were fraudulent, although a certain small percentage are, but they just they were intuitive, as we all are, but they had limited ability, if any, to communicate with the dead. So I met with some well-recognized, scientists in the field that study mediumship, and I kind of picked their brains, and they helped me to develop, our own certification process. So, we've been doing that consistently since 2005. And so obviously over those years, I've witnessed, I can't tell you how many, medium readings between that and, the work in the foundation and demonstrations and so forth. And, the mediums, I don't have to tell you, are they have a lot of responsibility because they're just sitting with grieving people that are just, just on the edge, they of belief, is this afterlife just a crock, or is it real? And if they go in and they get a horrible medium reading, it does more damage, they're in worse shape than when they got there. On the other hand, a really evidential mediumship reading can change their lives for the better, and have profound influence, on the rest of their life. So, as a resource for the bereaved, we set up our own evaluation system. Now, I had no idea when we started, like how many people would gain certification, like percentage wise, and not. And what I found consistently over the years is that but only between 10 and 15% of the mediums that we evaluated, gained certification, which meant that 85 to 90% did not. And that didn't make me very popular in the mediumship community. But, I felt that, would you want this practitioner sitting with your loved one, charging a lot of money and having a long waiting list, or not, and we needed to have, it's not to say that our process is foolproof, but what we found over the years that the mediums that we certified are more consistent. They rarely, if ever, fail, to connect, and the evidence, and, we have 5 different scoring methods that we use. And they have to meet the minimum guidelines in each of the 5, scoring methods. And a medium with marginal ability is just simply not going to be able to gain certification. It's really tough. But that's the way, it has to be. So, and a lot of the mediums, the problem is that a lot of the mediums that we certified over the years have gone on to become famous. And, when a medium becomes famous, very often they do fewer and fewer readings. They charge more and more and more money, and their waiting list, before you know it, is 3-4 years. So, that doesn't do us any good, because you're grieving, you desperately want a medium reading, you go on the website, you pick out a medium, and they say, okay, I could read you in 3 years, and it'll be $800 for a reading. And, so,
Yeah.
of late, and it's all on me because I just was so involved in so many things, I really wasn't keeping up with it. So of late, we've been evaluating more and more mediums, and fortunately, we found, some very good ones over the past, couple of years, and they don't have long waiting lists, and they have um, they charge, reasonable, prices, and that, that we continue to do that. I think it's important to work, plus the fact that, I didn't write the book as an expose of mediumship. It was quite the opposite. I wanted to show that those who really can do what they claim, are a gift, and they do a tremendous service, and they're part of an elite class, and they should be recognized as such. And I hate it when, bad mediums kind of bring down the credibility of the good mediums. It's not fair, in that way. So, we continue to do that. It's one of the core services that we provide. Of course, there's no money can change hands, and medium can't pay to be part of the process. If they get certified, they can't pay to be listed on our site. That would diminish the integrity of the program. So, membership in the foundation is free as well. We don't want to deprive anybody of information because of money. So been under pressure for many, many years. I still am, to start charging for membership, even if it's a nominal amount, but I keep resisting it because it's not the kind of thing I want to charge for.
But people can donate. right?
Yeah, and that's how we survive. I mean, and people are very generous, and small donations add up. Every once in a while, you get a big donation, and my wife used to say, like, every time we were running low on money, like the universe would take care of it. All of a sudden, we'd get a big check in the mail and so forth. But because we have so many members, it feeds everything else. There's more donations. Our events are, we have 4 grief retreats a year. And they sell out within 2 weeks after I post them, and I post them like almost 7-8 months in advance. And that I attribute to Netflix, because we allowed Netflix to film that one entire retreat in Connecticut, and they got there Friday afternoon, and they stay till Sunday night. But you know what it's like in a film. I mean, between letting them film that and all the interviews they did with us personally, I counted, more than 70 hours of filming, and that's for about 25, 30 minutes of content. How do you, there's a lot of stuff that I wish, would have gotten in that didn't, but I understand the nature of the work. So,
Wow. So
yeah.
you've got a new book, and I was just looking last night at all the comments that people wrote about it. My life here and there, a journey that transcends time and space. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk to us about that?
Yeah. So again, I've led a kind of colorful life, going to college in the late '60s, and love and peace, and and all that stuff, and I've done a lot of different things over the years, and always like to write. So, the first part of the book is really an accounting of my life, and at times I'm sure that might make people cry, and that sometimes people might laugh their asses off. I've added to some of the stuff that they'll hear, um, but I always felt the way to back into telling people about the afterlife would have more impact in a novel form. So, I mean, it sort of, I had some criticism, because in the middle of the book, or toward the second half of the book, I I die in a plane crash on the way to one of our conferences. And then I explain, which is partly based on fact, my work with a physicist. We had developed a system between the two of us where one of us would be able to communicate with absolute clarity from the other side. But I had people, like friends of mine, that like were searching the internet to find out if I really died, because I said, okay, well, that means that the writing was good because you believed it, but and of course, so here I am, writing about what the afterlife is like. Obviously, it's just based upon all my reading, and experiences, and what I've heard, from others, but it's a way of opening up people's minds to what things might be like on the other side. And thus the title, My Life Here and There, because it's my life in both places.
Wow. So not only have you gone through grief this way, when that hurricane hit down where you lived, you lost part of your house, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had massive damage, but you know what? I lost, besides the major parts of the house, I lost all the belongings. That means 50, 60 years of photos, and all legal documents, and all foundation documents, because I had the office, and when I moved to the house. So it was a heavy hit. But as I tell people, I was kind of, I mean, it was stressful and it was aggravating, but after what I had been through, I was surprisingly calm throughout the whole thing, because there is a world of difference between losing a loved one and losing material things. The two can't be compared. So I've already been through the other part several times. So this was, I don't want to say it was a walk in the park, but it was manageable, because and I understand. I mean, most of the people that are on the island that I live, that lost everything. I didn't want to diminish their grief, because it is grief of your home and all your belongings is a form of grief. but I had the so-called luxury of being able to put that in perspective, because in the big picture, it doesn't mean anything. It does not, so I was able to get through it. And eventually, I was fortunate to find construction crews working around the clock, and now my home is totally rebuilt. But so in retrospect, how many times do things happen to us during the course of a day that we think is monumental? Oh my God, you hear people talking. Sometimes I want to choke people. It's like, you're not going to remember this 2 days from now. You want to know profound, grief and so forth. But again, it's, we're all human, and we all have egos, and we all have wants and needs. So I get it. I was like that. But I think that I think that having grief over losing someone does provide, even though it's hard to recognize for a lot of people for quite some time, it provides some meaning and purpose that didn't exist before. Things that were very important, mainly material things, don't have the same cachet as they once did, because that's not what's truly important.
Yeah, I think
As they
grief.
say, you're not taking it with you, right?
No, we're not. I think grief has the power to put us on that spiritual growth, giving us answers. I also know grief has the power to make us want to check out of life. And even if we don't physically do that, I think people can die inside. So any information that we can give to help people along the road. I know you've got a link on your website for grief as well as everything that you
Yeah.
have. So it's a good place to start. Let me remind everyone, foreverfamilyfoundation.org is the website. Bob, what questions should I have asked you that I didn't, or answers, or anything else you'd like to share? Because I'm finding our time really wonderful
Yeah,
and
well,
really
if
enjoy
you
being
want to
with you.
invite me back at any time, we can get into anything that you want. I mean, we could talk about the individual disciplines of research and so forth, and um, and how people can try to transform their grief and so forth. But no, I mean, it's a pleasure talking with you, and yeah, I think we got in the most of the points, and you covered them quite well. I appreciate that.
Oh, thanks. Any closing words for our listeners or our viewers?
No, I just, I often urge people, and I was guilty of it, is that we never, take the time to just experience anymore. I mean, even you watch people, even when they're sightseeing or they're near something. I mean, they get so stressed over getting the perfect photo. It's or you go to a restaurant and you see a party of 10, and all 10 people are on their phones at the table. It's like we never just experience things, for what they are. I mean, I've replaced um the things that I used to enjoy with sitting out on my deck, pre-dawn, and waiting for the sun, to rise, and, listening to the birds and watching the vibrant colors, and so forth. And that's my adrenaline, things like that. I just would urge people to always try to step back and just experience, because there's so many things that are happening around us that we just simply refuse, or unwilling to recognize that can really do a lot for us all.
I agree 100%. My mom and I owned a 30 plus year catering company that we traveled the country cooking for race car teams, cooking for 800 to 1,500 people. It was a big organization, shut down due to COVID. She developed breast cancer. She's fine, but it turned our life upside down. And so we ended up getting a house. I'm looking over the woods. Every day, Bob, I go out and feed the birds. I get wild turkeys and the chipmunks and squirrels, and I must have 200 hummingbirds by the gallons of nectar that I'm putting out.
Wow.
And for 30 years, I wasn't present to the miracle of life. And I can tell you, my heart is happy. It's full. It's being with my mom, who's growing older, and she's just the love of my life and extraordinary conversations. And I don't think we need to wait to have that happen. Like we can actually stop and smell the roses, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like I always said, I'm very poor at meditation. I'm in a formal meditation the way I think it's supposed to be. But when I'm sitting out on the deck watching the sun come up, that's meditation, I mean, meditation comes in music and in art and nature, we all meditate in different ways. And I after Fran passed, I started playing golf again, and the people in the golf club, think that I'm a total antisocial person because I always play by myself. I don't want to play with anybody else because that's a form of meditation for me. I just walking through the nature and the course and thinking of things, and I don't want the pressure of competing or anything else. So it's another form of meditation. Meditation just is all around us if we want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a guy that I met. I had been on a cruise with a group of people, and we stopped in, I think, maybe St. Thomas. I'm not exactly sure, but we went to one of the private beaches, and there was an old security guard, and he had the long dreadlocks, and he was telling me stories and reciting poetry and these just beautiful things that resonated with my soul. And then I, stupid me, asked him if he took a course and learned how to write that way or if this was somebody else's works. And he says, honey, I just watched the waves and it all came to me. So I thought, wow, yeah, being present, being with nature.
Yeah,
Amazing. Well, Bob, thank you so much for being our guest today. And let's plan another interview because then we can delve into something else you want to talk
sure.
about. I'm left wanting more, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, I appreciate that. I enjoyed it very much. I respect the work that you do. And I was very happy to be on the show tonight.
Well, thanks. And for our listener or our viewer, thank you for taking the time to be here. As a reminder, you can go to wedon'tdie.com. That is the home base. I always encourage people to come to our free Sunday gathering, which happens 2 p.m. New York time. We have been running it, well, our 4 years now, quite a long time. What was the idea of just getting everyone through the dark times with COVID has become an international sensation. It's free, it's fabulous, it's inspiring. It's great to hear about life after death and know our loved ones are around. But I think it's also very important if we don't die to have a powerful life, go after our dreams, help others, do what we can, and really make the most out of our life. So, reminder, go to foreverfamilyfoundation.org and check out all great Bob's things. And he and his wife had started, and the foundation continues on. It's pretty great. Doesn't cost anything to become a member, and you get emails and all kinds of good stuff. So, in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain. I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. I do believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here on earth is very important. So I really want to thank you for listening or for viewing, and we'll see you again soon.